All right. Great. Hello and welcome to SingaporeConnect COVID-19 Forum. For those of you joining us for the first time, SingaporeConnect is a San Francisco Bay Area-based volunteer-run overseas Singaporean group, which was started almost 20 years ago. Since March 15th this year, SingaporeConnect has been facilitating these community updates on the evolving COVID-19 situation in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Singapore Global Network. We've also had special guest subject matter experts from our community. As you all remember, in our previous sessions, we've addressed the impact of COVID-19 on personal and professional topics like COVID-19 prevention, the search for a COVID-19 cure, Singapore-US visa situation, job opportunities in Singapore, Singapore Bay Area restaurants, and just 2 weeks ago, we had the cooking from Singapore sessions, which was actually the second time we did that. Tonight, we're very, very pleased to have in our 14th session, Adrianna Tan from SF.gov to talk about the digital initiatives that the San Francisco city is embarking on and how she's helping to drive some of these different initiatives. So we're very excited to have her. And I think, Adrianna, maybe we can hear a little bit more about what we're doing in San Francisco over here to also, come across, right, so that we're not stuck in the wave 2 situation. So what's going on here and what are our sentiments? So in terms of participants here in today's call, we noticed from the data that we have preponderance of folks who are certainly here in the US for shelter in place, not surprising because of course, many of us are very interested to hear about the initiatives in San Francisco as well. And of course, there's some folks who are still planning on going back to Singapore but haven't done so. I think many have reservations over the visa situation and are concerned about whether they can come back if they leave. Suffice to say, I don't know what sort of sentiments you're experiencing in the San Francisco office, but our folks here are basically estimating that shelter in place is going to last for another 18 weeks, at least over summer and at the start of the, much of the year as well. The mode of this is about 12, but the average from the sentiment on the ground here is about 17 weeks more for sure. And I'm already hearing signals from my kids who are in high school that they're going to be doing online learning for high school as well. So that's confirmed. And some of my eldest son, who's actually in college, they've told him not to return back for college. In fact, he's doing classes online too. So I think it's really in line with the sentiment and concern, right, about actually starting things up too soon. Now, in terms of the healthcare system, we still consistently have the group here being concerned about the US in terms of being overwhelmed. In fact, the numbers have gone up. So I think there's a sense that wave 2 is coming around the corner and that folks are concerned about how do we actually stem the tide, right, of cases that we've been reading a lot about. Interestingly enough, the people who are on the call here are also concerned about the situation in Singapore. So we do have a slight rise as well from 2 weeks ago. Having said that, folks in the US and Singapore both feel that a little more concerned about the cases, about reopening. I think we see that in both the US and Singapore, and more so in the US, folks are thinking that we're opening up too soon. So that's actually something to think about as well as we go through the data and hear more from you about what's happening in San Francisco. So without further ado, let me introduce Adrianna Tan. Formally, Adrianna Tan is from the it's from the San Francisco city government. Yes. So Adrianna, welcome to our session this evening. If you could just kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you'll be able to share with us today.
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I moved to San Francisco after spending a couple of years in different parts of the world, mostly India, Myanmar, Indonesia, and elsewhere, where I was mostly working with startups or running my own. And so 2 years ago, I moved here and I've been working here ever since. Last year, I had the opportunity to change track in terms of my career outlook, because I've always been passionate about using my skills in technology and applying it in a space where I could see like social impact. So even in the fintech startup that I founded and ran for a couple of years in Indonesia a couple of years ago, that also, I guess you could call it social impact, because we were working to build banking services for the unbanked in Indonesia and Myanmar. And so when I found out that San Francisco had a team that was doing exactly that, I jumped on it and I had the opportunity to start at this role. And I can tell you a bit more about it later, but we are basically a team that sits under the city administrator's office, not under the mayor's office. And we work on initiatives across the city. SF.gov is one of them. We also have a product in affordable housing. We also have a few products in permitting. We have an application to start a cannabis business. So very different from what I might be doing back in Singapore.
Wow, yes, that's super fascinating indeed. Adrianna, would you like to share your screen and we can take it from there? So let me stop my sharing so you can. Perfect. That's a super fascinating background indeed.
Okay.
What role were you doing as Uber's first Singaporean employee?
I was like their employee number one, and I was working on a mix of product and marketing. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Thank you.
Right. So I gave a talk like this a couple of weeks ago to a product manager group out of India. Because I worked there for some time, I am also in a community of like a few hundred PMs out of India. And so I showed them this table of what the differences were for me between private sector and the public sector. And you can see here that in the last row, I feel very strongly about how I think it's really important to make a difference of the sort of work that I do and the skill sets that I have. And that's why I do this job. And so, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have come across SF.gov as part of your, like, what should I do now? What should I do next? Information gathering, especially in the early days of SF.gov. And the history of this product is actually really interesting because before the digital services team got started, there were more than 200 different city websites. We actually still have more than 200 different city websites, but this is the first time that we have one central web presence. And so my boss, who brought me into this team, she had come from working on GovTech in the UK for a number of years, and she believed very strongly in like having one place where you could like give out all the information, write it well, make sure that everybody understands it, make sure it's accessible, and have it be available in all the different languages. And so that's exactly what we did. We were very lucky that this product was already up and running by the time the pandemic hit, because it very quickly became like a one-stop shop for people to come and find out what's happening, whether you lived here, whether you were like a business owner. It was vital at the time to be able to showcase all of the information in one place. And so during the first days of shelter in place, we saw a 200 times increase in site usage. Previously, it was a little bit like niche content. It was like, you know, how do I get a birth certificate? But then because of pandemic information, we had to like iterate very, very quickly and offer everybody everything that they needed. And so I provided a link here to a medium.com article written by our content person who talked about how she had, you know, gone through this very intense moment of trying to distill basically bureaucratic policy, which is a big part of our job, into easy to read English, and then like have it in all the different languages all at the same time. So in a way, it was a model for many cities and states, because not every city has its own digital services team. But we did, and in fact, we're one of the biggest ones. We have about 35 people, and we're still hiring, and we can talk a bit more about that later. And so in a way, our team was like a model for the other cities and states that were just up and coming with their digital approach. And so this is like an example of what, you know, can you not do that?
Yeah, I think we have someone with a background noise right now.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, okay.
That's my
perfect.
Yeah. All right. So I was saying that we got up and running very, very quickly. And we were able to really just showcase all the important information, because as you might remember in the early days, like there was so much legalese, but nobody really knew what you can do and what you cannot do. And so this was like a response that we got, not just across California, but also from other people who do our jobs in other parts of the country as well. And we also had to start working very quickly and very rapidly on a number of things. So this is a product that I worked on pretty much on like day one. We were trying to figure out what businesses needed and what people needed. And so this was our first full digital service, meaning that you could go on the site, you could find out information about it, and you could start an application and you could complete it. And we had to get this up and running really quickly because people were extremely concerned that they were not going to be able to pay people, and that they were going to have to close down basically. So the city came up with a plan to give out $10 to $15 million, and then it was our job to try to tell people about it and to try to give it away. And so we worked with different agencies that were involved in that, namely the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, to build a digital application in which we processed $10 million in 2 weeks. It was very, very quick out the door. People just really needed this extra support to give employees extra sick time and to be reimbursed for it. So that was the first thing that I did during this time. And there was a photo as well of what, of long lines outside the Department of Building Inspections as well as the Planning Department. Because if you look at these people holding these very long reams of paper, it's just anyone. It could be an architect, it could be a homeowner, anybody who wants to build anything in San Francisco has traditionally had to stand in line and submit paperwork like this. And we didn't have anything digital. We were in the process of going online with some of this stuff, but we were not able to get it all up and running very quickly until the pandemic hit, and then we had to build this end-to-end digital permitting product in a very, very short time. And the next day, we had to start building COVID test scheduling for frontline employees. So all in all, it's been a really intense couple of months. If you've seen this stay home or stay 6 feet apart sign all across the city, as well as like the outdoor business permit signs that you see at restaurants that have started to open. All of this stuff is our work, in the sense that it was our designers and our content people who wrote these signs, who designed these beautiful things. And it really comes down to having a very strong, coherent city brand presence that we did not have before this team got started. And some of the differences I found to be interesting, and in fact, my boss also wrote a blog post about this because, she's British. We've both commonly said in our home countries, there is no such thing as trying to convince people to do something, because, things are a little bit more top down in both the UK and in Singapore. But here, given the federated nature of the city government, in that it's so fragmented, different agencies do different things. Some people don't even report to the mayor. Some people don't even report to anybody. It's very difficult to really do things in a very centralized way. And so even during this pandemic period, and I think contact tracing is a good example of that, there was a lot of time, I think, that we had to spend trying to get buy-in from stakeholders. But given that this is an emergency, given that, nobody wants to be the one to affect lives and livelihoods, people really came around to move fast and build things together and set the differences aside, which I really admired, despite how messy it was at times. And so one of the things that I've had to do has been to try to figure out how to work within that sort of framework, because that's just very different from what I'm used to back in Singapore as well as in other parts of Asia. SF.gov is not the only thing that we do. We also work on economic recovery. And so the paid sick leave project that we call Workers and Families First, that was completed in a sense that people applied for all of it within the first couple of days. And then after that, that gave us the tools to also support other projects like the Resiliency Fund, as well as shared spaces. So if you're starting to see restaurants putting their tables and chairs outdoors, and you're seeing them having parklets and taking over parking spaces. All of that was part of our work. So we don't do all of it, of course, because behind the scenes, the MTA has to do stuff. The um, alcohol licensing people have to go and check on things, but we do all the stuff that's public facing, and that's really our mandate, to work on things that are public facing and streamline those processes, reduce the bureaucracy, and make things as easy as possible for San Franciscans. We also work on affordable housing. So we have a site called housing.sf.gov.org, where if you make below the median income in San Francisco, you're eligible to bid and try to purchase or rent a certain affordable housing units. And so we built the site a long time ago. We also run a lottery, help them run the lottery anyway. And currently we're working on things that have to do with permitting and licensing. And that all of this is really important because during the pandemic, it really showed other city departments that might have been slower to get on the digital bandwagon for a number of reasons, either because they think it's hard or they think it's too much change management. But now that they're like, okay, we're going to all be home for some time and we're going to still have to do our work anyway, buildings still have to get built. And currently it takes something like 6 years for anybody to get the right permits to build a building in San Francisco, which is crazy. But I think that really shows why the work that we do is so important. And so more and more our work is starting to shift, not just shift and focus on how do we build online services that are going to make people's lives easier, where before it was like maybe we could just like use modern software practices and see what happens. But now I think we have a very, very clear mandate of what the next couple of years are going to look like for us. So my team is really interesting in that I've worked with a lot of startups. I've worked with a lot of like bigger tech companies, and I have found that this is the first place I've been in where content has been a really big deal. And a big part of that is because of the nature of the work that we do. Communication is super important, and being able to convey clearly what you're trying to say, I think, is a major part of where governments fail around the world. And so we have a very large team of content people who, I remember the first day when I started my job, I wrote a blog post, and I think I'm a pretty decent writer. I've been published and all that stuff, and they threw it back, and they canceled out 70% of it, and they were like, you need to make sure that someone in grade 5 can read your blog post, otherwise it's not going anywhere near our site, even if it's only for like the internal team. Like we have to like live and breathe all these values. And so we make sure that our content can be read by people with 5th grade reading levels, because we don't want to make the assumption that every San Franciscan can speak English at higher levels, because they might not have been very educated, or they might be immigrants. English might not be their first language. And so a big part of what I do every other day is to try to think about how the technology that we build how it impacts people who are not typical tech people. And that's actually been super rewarding, because it firstly is a technical challenge, right? Like how do you quickly iterate, but make sure that all of this stuff is available in 100% also in Spanish, also in Filipino, and also in Cantonese. And for the pandemic information, we also had to do Arabic and Russian and Vietnamese. There was a lot of commitment towards accessibility as well. So we have like an in-house accessibility person. And as the director of product management, I lead a team of 6 PMs. And it's been a goal of mine that each of them are going to start building products with accessibility in mind. And that means that they have to think about whether this stuff works on screen readers. What about people who have visual impairment? What about colors and contrast and all that stuff? So before, when I was working with like private companies, everybody agrees that accessibility and inclusivity is great, but often it's an afterthought, whereas here it's the other way around, in that it's just what we have to do. And I feel very proud of this team that we've been able to iterate quickly while making sure that what we do helps people that need it the most. So there are content folks, there are product people, and this is the team that I lead. We have a fairly large engineering team as well. And all of us really come from all backgrounds. For most of us, it's our first government job. We didn't come to this saying, hey, I want to work for the government. It was more of a, I think we're starting to see a trend of people starting to feel that maybe this whole thing about moving fast and breaking things is just not for me. And I certainly came to that conclusion myself over the last couple of years in my career in tech. Maybe it's actually more important that we do work that makes a difference. And, you know, just walking down a street in Japantown where I was earlier today, being able to see that all these restaurants have been able to start up and they've been able to do so safely, and knowing that the many hours of conversations I've been in trying to figure out how to get someone to care about, like, you know, a button being here or like a checkbox being there, and like, you know, just convincing people to not put legal information all over a webpage. Seeing that we managed to make it work and that we managed to get to a point where everyone is able to come together, they're able to get their licenses very quickly. That really, I think, has been one of the proudest moments. So I think there was a question for me around what one of my proudest moments working here has been, and that would be it. It's also great that I'm able to walk up to any of these restaurants and do instant like user research. I could be like, hey, could you tell me how long you took to fill out this form? And thankfully it's been like, oh, I love it. I didn't think that it would be so good, but it was. And so people really have started from very low expectations of the city, and more they've been surprised that we're starting to do things in a user-friendly way, and accessibility and inclusivity is just a really big part of it. So as part of my everyday work, I work not just with the internal team, I also work with other city stakeholders. So it's very fluid. There are a few groups that I work with more, like for example, on all the permit work that we do, we work very closely with the planning department. As well as the Department of Building Inspections. On a lot of the economic recovery stuff, I work with Office of Economic and Workforce Development, the Port, MCA. I even worked sometimes with like Redwood Parks for various reasons. And so it's really given me really good insight into the way the city works and what works and what doesn't work. But I've come away from it knowing that I think that there are a lot of people who mean well and who are really talented in local government, and we're all just trying to figure out the best way to like offer our skills to the city that we love, and to know that it's not just San Franciscans who live here that that use the products that we build, is also the people who work here but who didn't live here. So currently there are some essential service workers that are going back to work, and you know, a lot of them, they might be janitors, they might be transit cleaners, they might be cleaning buses. They don't live here, right? They live like 4 hours away, and it's our job to keep them safe. And so we've also started working on a health check tool. But again, city is very fragmented, and there are just like many different competing priorities. So currently we work in a digital universe in which we mostly orbit around the mayor's office and the city administrator's office, and we mostly work on SF.gov and permitting and economic recovery. But sometimes people might come to us and say, hey, we need to do this thing for marriages. And then as the director of product management, it would be my role to go, what legacy software are you running when you marry people, and how are we going to connect to that? And like, you know, often it's like, how do we build an MVP that's just going to like work like right now, without like changing too much about your business processes, while also changing the ones that should be changed. And so it's not just software, it's also people management, it's also like trying to figure out who the hell knows the passwords to something sometimes, because they built that software in the 80s and nobody knows anything anymore. And so, yeah, it's definitely been very exciting. Sometimes I think about like how it's so different, right? Like people here care about very different things. Like privacy is a really, really big issue. So as part of my work, like we are collecting all this information. We don't absolutely have to, but we are like deleting like personal data like after a certain period of time, because I think all of us who work here also believe that like it's really important to be careful with data and to not keep data unless we have a plan around things like what do we do about surveillance and things like that. So it's certainly a very different approach, and I'm very grateful to be among like very smart team members who think very deeply about things like digital privacy and the future of like surveillance, and that's really changed my mind on a lot of things that I do in technology. But again, I keep coming back to equity and inclusivity, hearing feedback. You know, people yell at us all the time. But we still have to get on these calls and we still have to hear them yell at us and say, hey, you know, nobody's ever happy with us 100% on everything, which is fine. There's like, if we do shared spaces, then some people, maybe transit people, might be like, you're taking over something that could be a bike lane. And then if you do like something else, somebody's going to be like, well, what about disabled people? What about this? What about that? And I think it's our job to not be upset or defensive about any of this sort of reaction, and to really like listen to everybody, and to do what we can and do it the best we can, and to think about the impact of what are some of the trade-offs that we have to make and why we're making those trade-offs. And so, you know, not having digital identity, like I have phone numbers and emails, I can't even access social security numbers, of course. We don't know very much about the people. What do we do about fraud? And so I feel like we're starting on a very different base compared to, say, if I was doing the same thing back home. But I think it's also a very challenging problem to tackle. And I'm very excited for the future of it. So more and more I see our team playing a big part in the city's approach to the next couple of years, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So I think that's it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think that this has really been an awesome introduction. I've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for 20 years. I kind of never really thought about it from this angle. And I'm super proud that we have a Singaporean really at the helm of this, right, and to drive these initiatives. Now, I know many of you, when you were responding to the survey, pre-forum survey, had a couple of questions here for us, and I think Adrianna has addressed a few of them. But let's run through some of these different ones here. How do you determine what the public wants? Is there some kind of outreach feedback capability? What customer experience study? What sort of, what initiatives do you do to get inspiration?
So our team is very big on like user research and closing the feedback loop. And so as part of all the stuff we do a lot of user research. We also do a lot of like user testing. So even when times are really tough, like when I had to launch all of these services like tomorrow, we still had to set some time aside and go, let's do as much user testing as we can. And so that's really the philosophy of this team across the entire team at every level, that sometimes we have to push back on people who want to do something immediately and say, no, I need like one more day because I need to know what people think about it, if that's what they really want or if we're doing something wrong. And so, yeah, there is definitely a big culture of like outreach and feedback. Before COVID, we had a team that would regularly like walk across City Hall and go to the library, which the main library, which, as you know, is like a place where a lot of people from different backgrounds gather. I believe it's also the only library in the US that actually has like a full-time homeless services coordinator. And so we would work with the librarians, and we would work with people who didn't have a phone, had never seen a browser, or didn't speak English or write it or read it. And we would sit down with them and we would try to do things like understand, would they click on the globe that says it's a language selector, or would they just not see it? And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. We have very good relationships with the data.sf team. And so I think that's related to number two as well. We unfortunately do not have contact tracing data. We're very far behind compared to many Asian countries on where we're doing where and how we're doing contact tracing. I believe the last time I heard about that, it was about we were trying to figure out which approach was best, and I believe we decided that the Apple/Google Bluetooth method without location surveillance was the way to go. Unfortunately, I think we're still in the low tech part of it, but we have partnered with like UCSF, I believe, and volunteers. And then there's also a state initiative. We're also trying to coordinate on that. And so my point in all of this is that no, we don't have public data, but if you go to Data SF, there are a lot of data sets for a lot of things, including some, maybe not like real time, but like pretty well updated like information about COVID, as well as city governance for on Data SF, and you can download them in whatever format. So coming back to one, like I think our job is quite clearly cut out for us in that we know as people who live here what some of the really broken things are. And so we have a very long to-do list already. Like we have to, have a centralized web presence, right? We have to convince people that nobody wants to see your org chart, but they want to see how I can get my birth certificate, how I can like get this, get that from the city. We know that building and permitting is completely broken. Everybody knows that, right? So how do we do things that we can to reduce the time that somebody would take to get what they need? Even before we go live with product, like we were working on something called the permit for accessory dwelling unit. So that's not live yet because like COVID had sort of put a stop on that. We did some user research where we showed people who had gone through the process before a couple of years ago, like a 10-step, like a page with 10 steps, step 1 to 10, like first do this, then get that, and then get number 3, 4 to 10. And it wasn't even service in the sense that we hadn't even built out the application stuff. And some of these people looked at it and they were like, if 5 years ago or 2 years ago, I had seen this page, I would have not spent $20,000 and 5 years trying to get this permit only to get to step 7 and realize that I couldn't have done it at all and I shouldn't have bothered. So we, in the team, a few of us care about certain specific things, but largely it's the leader of this team, who's the Chief Digital Services Officer, Carrie Bishop, working with the leadership team, of which I'm a part, as well as the people that she reports to in the city administrator's office, as well as the people that she's counterparts with, different leaders of different departments. And we really set the vision for like what we're going to be working on for the next couple of years. And in order to figure out if that's what people want, then we have to do the user research that we have to do anyway. So yeah, that's my answer to 1 and 2. Yeah.
So a quick question here, and I know we have a few questions coming up as well, and I encourage others here in the forum to type in your questions into the group chat so that we can start, organize them as we prepare them for Adrianna. So Adrianna, how do you measure success? If we look at what you just said, right, the building permits taking 6 years to process, I'm actually trying to get my pool removed and we just filed our permit. How many years is it going to take for me to get approval?
Well, the current project that I'm working on is I'm trying to figure out how to unblock the back-end processes, because like I can build anything on the front end, but then if on the back end you're not processing any of this stuff because you don't know how to deal with like applications in a COVID world, then you could get a lot of applications and nothing is going to move, which is actually what is happening. And so, yeah, you have to keep in mind that there is a lot of change management involved, and some departments are better at that than others.
Got it. And so how do you typically measure success in your initiatives? How do you set that in a world of city government?
So that's part of the conversation that our entire team is having, because our team is so new, right? So like, what have we managed to achieve and what would success mean going forward? And so we have a number of things like you know, are people using SF.gov the way we think they should be? Is everyone able to access information regardless of their like language proficiency? Are disabled people able to use our services just as well as somebody who is not? So all of these things are very important to us above and beyond any type of like metrics that I might have measured in like a private startup. Of course, those are important too, but these things are even more important to me. And for the city at large, our impact as a whole is available on Data SF. I believe you can look at like the city report book, something, I forgot the actual name, but there is like a governance report. And so we can see that residents have given us a B+ on a number of things, right? And like a C on something else and A on other things. So yeah, so I feel like there's some degree of transparency there around what people think about us in every measure and why. And that's certainly something the city cares about, but whether or not my team is able to like directly influence all of that as a whole, like we're not going to know for like a couple of years because these things just don't move that quickly.
Great. Hey, that's really interesting. Now, you talked about how that COVID has accelerated, right, digital transformation through putting in place the permit situation, the testing situation, and how, as Richard observed, it has broken down the barriers between the city government areas, departments. When COVID is over, how can this temporary success continue to become the trend in city government?
I think that this entire process actually has led to a situation where we're starting to see a lot of young people get interested in this type of work because they're like, I no longer want to work at, a big company, and I want to make a difference. And so I think that we're going to see, and I'm already starting to see that in my hiring processes, more and more people come in and try to join and do this type of work, which only means that like our ability and capacity to like build these types of digital processes and assist in transformation is going to increase. But secondly, I think COVID has given us the experience of just cross-agency collaboration, right? Not to say that there weren't any before, but before I would say maybe it was a little bit more formal. It was like once in a while I might do a round table or steering committee and talk about something, and maybe like it takes longer to actually like execute on those things compared to like just a lot of us are working together like rapidly and frequently across a range of things to iterate on many different things. And so after having experienced this sort of urgency and the joy, I guess, of like shipping things that make a difference, I think that we're going to see that we are going to continue to collaborate very frequently in order to do more for the city.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrianna. Extending that notion of collaboration, not just among the city government departments, how is the city partnering with the private sector? Are there certain gaps in technology, for example, that you're looking at third parties or the private sector for advice on?
Well, as someone who has mostly been in a private sector, I remember having that mindset that maybe like if government would work more closely with the private sector, then maybe they could like do better. But now that I've been on the other side, I've come to realize that sometimes that's just not really that easy for a number of reasons, mostly that the time required to get up to speed in terms of like stakeholders you need to know or like things you need to like figure out before you can even start working on something. Especially in an emergency, it's very difficult to include third parties into that sort of thing. We've worked with a number of different startups, some very famous ones on different things. The most successful partnerships in my mind have been the ones that have been over a longer period of time, trying to take on a small part of a very big problem. So I know that I think Google was working closely with the mayor's office on a program called Civic Bridge, where they they gave some engineering time over quite a long period of time, as well as the designer time, in order to create a solution for the affordable housing product that we now have. And so that sort of thing, I think, has been more or less a success. But in terms of the companies who are trying to be helpful during like a pandemic, it hasn't been that helpful for all these reasons. And very often it ends up just being very superficial. Like they'll be like, I designed this thing, it looks great. And it's like, yeah, but we did that also. And, I'm not certain what value a lot of companies can bring in these situations without like a very long period of commitment and without like prior engagement.
I see. Interesting. What are some of the skill sets that you feel are lacking, right, in the city government that you're looking for out there that's scarce?
Well, I think the intersection of people who have all these skills in the private sector and who have a drive, I think, to do this type of work. It's a very clear intersection to me. It's almost always a Venn diagram of people who have done this type of work on the side, but then has always volunteered or has always like worked in an impact thing or has always been like, looking for ways to do more. And so I think that in the last couple of years, this industry that we call civic tech has been very small and very insular, very focused on, the people who do things like Code for America or people who came from ATINA for like USDS. But now that this pool is growing, I'm excited to see what sort of talent we will see when we expand beyond just people who went to like these small number of places. And so I didn't go to any of these places, but I was able to find an inroad into it because of some of the work that I did before, as well as the connections that I had. Unfortunately, it seems like it's not an easy industry to break into because there are not many entry-level jobs. And so that's definitely something that I would like to see this industry change in terms of like offering more internships and more programs instead of just seeking out like very senior people at a mid or high level of their career.
Got it. You said there were 6 product managers who reported to you. Who's actually building the products? What is the total size of the team?
We're about 35, 36 at the moment. We have a very large engineering team as well. And so each PM works with like a group of engineers, almost like a squad, if you will. But we work on various things at various times. And then in places where there might be specialized information required. So, a lot of governments work on Drupal, and apparently it's very hard to hire Drupal developers. Nobody wants to touch it. There are contractors out there who might like supplement some of the work that we do, but we almost always have like full-time engineers on all of the products.
Got it. What about data scientists or, UI folks? Do you have?
Yeah, so the UI team is pretty large as well. The design team would be the largest. So we're structured in a way where the leadership team is like me in product, somebody else in design, and someone else in engineering. And so in the design team, the content folks, UI, UX people, as well as user research sit under the design team. And so, yeah, we do everything in-house except for things where we require additional support.
Got it. Truly interesting. I mean, we're all fighting for talent here, Adrianna. I run a software company as well, and it's super hard to get great talent. And I think in the space of city government too, you probably have to deal with a lot of confidential data. So everyone, I'm guessing, needs to be verified. It's not like you can outsource to, some other country or a ad hoc worker to manage.
You have to go through like a background check. To like work here, and then like for like contracting, there are like some very strict requirements around how we do it. Procurement and hiring are like my, 2 things that I spend the most time doing.
That's really cool. Well, thank you very much for this introduction. I don't see any additional questions coming in, but I think we really had a comprehensive conversation. Adrianna, would you mind if any member of the body, of the community here reaches out to you directly if they have any?
Yeah. Should I leave my email or something?
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. If you can put it into the slide, and then at the end I can flash it up as well.
Okay, sure.
Super. Thank you. So let's pivot into the next topic. Very much appreciate Adriana's feedback and information here. I think, I think we hear about, we've been experiencing this, as citizens of or as people who live right in the SF Bay Area, and we see how the city governments have been evolving so quickly to deal with all the different requests, especially information. And outreach. It's been incredible how everyone's been evolving towards that. Well, we have our own publicity needs as well as a community, and I wanted to touch on a few of these with us today. So many of you are wondering, for National Day, what is it that we're doing? So I'm very pleased to announce that in partnership with the Singapore Global Network, as well as MFA, who have always been supportive of us, we actually have two key initiatives. One is the National Day in Place. So this is actually our NDP. So it's not a parade, it's a day in place, where Singapore Connect is organizing a virtual event in 2 weeks' time, just in this, it's a little earlier than our usual slot, so not 8 o'clock, but 6 o'clock, right? Because we're actually going to have dinner. It's going to be interesting how we're going to do it. So essentially, some of you must be wondering because you're still waiting to hear for details. We're still locking that out as well. But essentially, what we're doing is we are trying to get a certain number of food vendors to give us, like different dishes, right? So we now have nasi rendang, for example. We have a number of really interesting dishes that we're still finalizing, but certainly the whole notion here is to get as close to Singapore hawker fare as possible. So we're very excited to have that range, and the food has been very, very kindly supported by Singapore Global Network. So we'll have it subsidized, right? So basically, we'll have to pay for some of the food because we can't predict, who's actually going to come have the food, but it's going to be offered at a subsidy so that we can pick and choose what we want to do, just as we would if we were in a carnival, right? You sort of have different food options that we will use, and we will be leveraging as a distribution platform. I mean, those of you who were with us 2 weeks ago will remember Say We is the website. They will be working with us to distribute the food. We've already got a few vendors like Dabao Singapore, Nora Haran, who both of whom you may remember were with us 2 weeks ago, and they showed us how to cook carrot cake as well as beef rendang. Well, this time they're going to be distributing some of the food they make. And then Non Lim has very kindly sponsored some of the lucky draw prizes as well. And Shiok, of course, he's also supplying food. So Dennis has been very kind to participate. We have a number of other food vendors as well, but we're just kind of locking down the actual items. So if you guys have particular favorites that you really would like to have, that would, we can pass the word on to the vendors so that we can get some of this fired up as well. So let us know if you have any questions along those lines, but there is a sign-up form for food, and you can go to our Facebook page, or you can come to the link over here, which I will share with you shortly as well, for you to register if you haven't already. Now, some of you might be not from the Bay Area, and you're actually from elsewhere like Boston or New York, so you're most certainly welcome to participate. It's just that the food may be a little harder to get across to you, so probably we won't have the food component of it in terms of the celebration, but we'll try to see if there's a way where you can still join us in terms of eating your favorite food and then participating. But the core part of this is we will have games, lucky draw, as different quizzes. The quizzes are super interesting. So based on the agenda we've put together, we're trying to bring on a couple of entertainers. So if you guys are entertaining and you would like to reach out to us and see how you can help us with this event, happy to certainly have you contribute as well. Okay, speaking of our own entertainment and building that up, we're actually putting together, and this is our second major initiative, a virtual choir. Now, many of you have seen some of these virtual choirs, such as the one that Voices of Singapore did for home, and they are also doing a Sing Nation initiative, on 1st of August as well as 8th of August. Those are different. Those are just sing along. This is actually a virtual choir. So we're going to create a wall of faces, right? But given that we're all, like normal amateur karaoke singers, think of this as a mass karaoke event, right? So we put together an instruction video where we really would hope that you could wear your t-shirt, like say, for example, this is my Haas School of Business t-shirt from UC Berkeley. So I can wear that in the video and kind of share where I'm coming from, either where I went to school or the company that I represent. Let's say if I'm from Apple or Google, I can certainly wear that too. And if you don't feel that you have any place that you certainly come from, you can wear a red or white shirt. Suffice to say, we're trying to show the impact that we have across the US, right? And where we're coming from, because right now we already have folks from Texas, from Arizona, one or two from Hawaii who might be submitting, and folks from New York and Boston are also going to be contributing. So folks from all over the US are sort of rallying and practicing. Now, when I say practice, I kind of really mean this, because this song I know is not easy. This year's song is Everything I Am. And it's kind of jazzy, kind of emo-ish, and the main singer who sings this does this very stylishly. I'll say, folks, don't worry. When we have 100 people singing together or 50 people singing together, all our voices will blend together and it will sound okay. So if your individual recording doesn't sound great, don't worry. As a group, we'll sound awesome. At least I'll make it sound awesome. Somehow we'll try to make sure that we highlight the voices that can sing better versus not. So the key thing is to show up, do your video, get your t-shirt with the right top and all that, and just do your best, because we'll make our best to do, to make us all look good. And where is this going to be shown? It's going to be shown on our Singapore Connect channel on YouTube. So we're going to be circulating it as well. And it's a way for us to sort of commiserate and celebrate, right, this time that we've had through COVID. And coincidentally, in the next 2 weeks, it will be our 15th Singapore Connect, COVID-19 session, in a sense, as well. So the 15th time we're meeting as a community, and we really want to celebrate all the different forums that we've done, all the times that we, have connected. And that is really the crux of this as a team. Not so much how great our singing is, because we know we're not a choral group, but really just celebrating our time together. And then when you're done, submit it into this Dropbox folder so that we can have your recording. And if you feel like you want to do a few recordings and you want me to just pick the ones that make the best sense, we can do that too. So don't feel shy. I think that the whole idea here is to just enjoy ourselves as a team. So I'm just going to go a quick round, with our co-sponsors here and our co-organizers to see if they have any additional thoughts, because I know there's a lot of things that's happening as well, even on the official level. So Daryl, if you're still here with us, any parting words on how we're celebrating National Day, or anything that we should be aware of?
Hi, Jasmine. Firstly, thanks, Adrianna. A very insightful session that you shared with us. Great to see Singaporean contributing to the tech sort of initiative in San Francisco. Secondly, I think, Jasmine, due to the pandemic this year, so what is going to happen is we're going to have a virtual National Day celebration, which will be orchestrated from DC itself. So Ambassador will be making a speech, and then I think we are going to have a collation of people who will be involved in that, and I think that's on 9th August itself. So I think more news will be coming your way once things are finalized, but that's coming along the way as well. Thanks.
Great. Well, Daryl, looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Now, what about anything on the Singapore Global Network side? David.
Hello, Jasmine. Thanks, Adrianna, for doing this again. So I think on my front, nothing further to add from Daryl. We just wanted to reiterate for everyone, please support Jasmine and Singapore Connect. Participate in the choir. I can't sing as well, but I think together, as what she mentioned, it's more about the effort behind it. We just try together as a community to do something, and I'm sure the outcome will be pretty good. And hope to see you all on the 8th of August as well for the National Day celebration with Singapore Connect.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you. And thank you so much for your support. I mean, David, I know you've been really working hard with headquarters, to help us pull off this event. It's the first time ever that our group is organizing a virtual choir, and maybe the first time ever that you guys are even sponsoring and supporting this a virtual choir around the world, right? So we're very excited to do our best and see what happens, to make this a success. So really looking forward to everybody's entry. And remember, we've got the instructions and we've put it in the chat window as well so that you can kind of refer to it. Thanks, David, once again for your support and getting the word out to our community as well. Mark, any parting words from your end?
Yeah, thank you, Adrianna. Again, really impressed that you've been able to do so much in what seems to be a relatively short time and very timely as well.
Thank you.
With the pandemic. Jasmine, I think we've been having an exciting time discussing the virtual choir and National Day. I'd like to encourage everybody, in addition to trying to sing, in addition to attending, share this event to all your North American, I won't say just US, Canadian, Singapore, Canadian-based Singaporeans are certainly in the same time zone and very welcome to join. Of course, food may be an even greater challenge, but I think we have enough videos on how to make, lovely Singaporean dishes that you can always follow along and create them at home. I think that's the idea we're having. Can we have an event where it's not just like a webinar, but you guys can actually participate? And I know from the discussions we have with our games and performances, you're not just going to be, let's sit back and listening. You're going to have to actually turn on your video and maybe dance or do something as part of that. So we really intend to connect you, even though I know, of course, we can't have a physical event.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting, right? Thank you, Mark, because we're actually going to have a lucky draw as well. So we have prizes, and of course, we're going to do the lucky draw, which is super exciting, which is always the case, right? Every Singapore Connect event was so super blessed.
Make sure you wear something nice for that, because I think we'll be asking people to send their National Day greetings on video, calling you out throughout the event. And some of the quiz questions may involve audience participation on the camera. So we have all these ideas. We are excited. Let's try it. This is our first and a virtual National Day in place event, and we look forward to making it a memorable one.
Yeah,
we should all show up. Yeah.
If you guys have ideas as well,
all the
let us know.
Healthcare workers and everyone. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And if you guys have any ideas as well about games that we should be doing, let us know too. We're very open to different ideas that we have, and I'm super glad for the committee to. As we work through all these different details, right? And really contributing our time together to make our shelter in place special National Day in place event a success. So thanks, Mark. And thank you all for joining us here today. Once again, Adrianna, this was super informative. Thank you so much for stepping up to share your story with us and your expertise and, really behind the scenes, right? What the city of San Francisco is doing.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing your email address as well, so that folks here can reach out to you if they have any questions. And once again, thank you to Daryl, thank you, David, as well as members of the broader MFA and the Singapore Global Network for your participation, and everyone here today for joining us. Well, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time. But in the meantime, hopefully we'll see your videos as well for the virtual choir and your registration for the National Day in Place event, so that we can properly plan for the food and games that we have in place. All right, everyone, good night for now, and looking forward to speaking with you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.